Learning to draw eyes is something that I waited way too long to do. I thought it was so easy, just draw a line and a circle and you're basically done, right? But looking back, old Marc definitely needed a lot of help with it, as you probably do too if you're watching this right now. Because drawing eyes is a little more complicated than it looks. And well, help is here. I'm Marc. I was a senior artist at Blizzard for years before I left to start an art school, which has been my focus ever since, along with teaching here on YouTube, of course. And today I'll show you the best way to practice drawing eyes, whether you prefer a more realistic style or more stylized. Basically everything I wish I knew when I still sucked at it. So at first I figured I didn't really need to learn any anatomy because I was always drawing in this more stylized way that doesn't really mimic reality anyway, so what's the point, right? But it turns out even manga eyes are based on real anatomy, and once you know how the thing is constructed, it makes drawing eyes in any angle and any style a million times easier. And what really pushed me to learn the actual structure was trying to draw the face at an angle, like something other than just a straight, angle, or the same 3/4 view that I was used to. And maybe you've tried this too, like where you draw the eye facing forward and then kind of deform it into the angle that you want. And well, that always looks kind of terrible. Because of course it does. The face and the eyes aren't flat. So your first step towards drawing great eyes in any style and any angle is to understand its form. So the eye is a ball. There you have it. Thank you all for coming to my TED Talk. No, but seriously, this seems obvious, but flipping your brain from thinking of the eye as a 2D shape to a 3D volume makes all the difference. Here's an eye drawn on a flat surface and one on a ball. From the front view, they barely look different, but the second we start rotating them around, the eyeball holds up while the flat one falls flat. Now we need to think of eyelids too, and the best way to think of those, I think, is just as slightly bigger balls, as if everything but the eye opening got extruded outwards like this. And one thing I like to do in 2D that a lot of 3D artists like to do is treat the iris almost as a concave ball. In my recent Gachiakuda study, the author did this a bunch with a lot of her drawings, and it gives the eye this sense of depth. And I've used this myself quite a bit ever since my own time as a 3D artist. And when you put all of this together, you get an eye that looks really different depending on the angle. See how here we only see the eyelids partially because they wrap around the spherical surface of the eyeball, or how a view from below the eye takes on almost a croissant shape. So what do we do with this information? Well, you start pulling realistic references whenever you draw. So that's number one, because there's really no way to learn how to draw good eyes without them. And once you're familiar with the real proportions, it becomes pretty easy to modify things and hit the style you want. So the next step is drawing the eye, which we'll do now. So let's start with the easy front view. To remember anything, it helps to simplify things. So we'll dumb down the eye shape to just about 4 lines. Or 4 strokes. One line starting at the inner corner, going up sharply, a mostly straight line going into another line pointing down, and then a longer curve joining back where we started. And usually the eye is slightly slanted too, with the outer corner sitting a bit higher. So that's the shape to remember, and from there you can get tons of variety by just changing those line angles a little bit. Now adding thickness to the eyelids will make this way more realistic, and so does adding a tear duct. And that might seem like a detail, but this is something that will show up in stylized eyes as well, because good manga is based on realism after all. So how does this hold up at different angles? Using a reference, all I'm really doing is placing those same 4 lines and adjusting them to the angle I'm seeing. Those simple lines are what stick in your brain and let you eventually draw from imagination. Extreme angles are trickier, obviously, so you'll lean on references a lot more there, but it's all the same components really. And one more thing, the iris changes shape too depending on where it's pointing. So if it's dead center in the eyeball looking at you directly, well, it'll be a perfect circle. But the more it faces away, the more that circle compresses and turns into more of a smaller and smaller ellipse. But honestly, the hardest part in all of this is the second eye. So I'd really recommend always practicing eyes in pairs because, well, they work together. They point in the same direction, usually, and they're lined up symmetrically on the face. And the face, like the eyeballs, isn't flat. So The single most important thing here is to line up the inner and outer corners of both eyes properly, keeping the curvature of the face in mind when it's turned. That's the thing that makes or breaks your character faces. Now, before we stylize and get into the eyelashes, I know I'm cramming a lot of information in a short YouTube video, but if you want the more in-depth version, not just about the eye's anatomy, but the head anatomy, the entire body's anatomy, composition, design, basically every topic you would need to be able to draw anything your mind can imagine in any style, well, check out my art education program, Art School for Digital Artists, the sponsor of this video. It's a university equivalent art education with 30 classes and around 87 hours of structured content, a week-by-week study guide so you always know what to work on next, and a private Discord community full of artists leveling up their work, whether that's as a hobby or with the aim of going pro. And talking about that, I've got current and ex-students in most of the major game studios around the world, so check the details with the link in the video description. The big summer sale is almost over, so I don't want you to miss out on the big discount that it comes with. It'll be good until the end of the month only, so check it out. And now, let's stylize. So if you draw manga eyes, you might still think the realistic stuff is pointless. And sure, some styles drop a lot of it, but most manga eyes I've seen clearly follow real anatomy. They just remove some of the details, but the details that do stay are still built on proper 3D form. Like the iris gets drawn in really creative ways, but you'll usually still have a pupil and an iris. And the eye shape might be exaggerated, but you can still usually find those same 4 lines underneath, just maybe suggested rather than fully drawn out. The eyelashes are another place where the artist can really go wild, because drawing each individual lash usually doesn't look that great. And I know that's going to be the first instinct for a lot of people, but it tends to look way better to bunch them together. Same idea, you know, as drawing locks of hair instead of every single hair. And there's a ton of variety for this stuff out there. Sometimes characters have no eyelashes at all. Sometimes they're huge and like really prominent. One thing to keep in mind here is that the lashes don't all point in the same direction. They follow the curve of the eyelid, so their angle shifts along with it. I find it helps to first draw a little cap for the upper lashes, since those are like the prominent ones, and then fill in that shapes with like clusters of eyelashes. And the eyelids are usually one of the first thing to go in a stylized eye, but they're not really ignored. Like, look here, the lashes don't attach right to the outline of the eye, and that's because they're supposed to attach at the edge of the eyelid. So by offsetting them slightly, we can suggest the eyelid's thickness without ever drawing a line for it. Just one way to stylize it. So let's apply all of it, but this time working on a semi-realistic version, but just using what I've covered so far. So I'll start with the same 4 lines, right? The iris and the lashes in groups, so that it almost looks like a single mask, but I'll still want to detail those a little bit more than the stylized version. And now with the flat colors on there, I can help make the eyeball sit properly inside the eyelids with a bit of shadow cast by the upper lids, and the lashes, don't forget about those. They also cast shadow. And by the way, my shadow and reflections are basically bluish because the eye is reflecting the light of the sky, at least in my scene here. And since this is more realistic, I can add a waterline to help make the eye feel more alive. Just a little speck of white in between the eyeball and the eyelids, and a bright reflection also to sell that the eye is wet and shiny. The crisper the reflection is, the glossier the surface appears. And then some finishing touches, and let's call this done. And that's what we got. What do you think? Obviously, this looks easier than it actually is, but it's nothing a bit of practice can't fix. As long as you're using references and keeping all of this in mind, eyes are always super fun to draw, and they're what gives your characters life, right? So I think they're really worth focusing on. But even the best eyes won't look any good on a poorly constructed face, so I would really recommend my tutorial on drawing the head shape next. With that, you'll be unstoppable. So click the link right here, it'll appear on screen, and I'll see you over there. Click it.
Do it now!